Hello, everybody. My name is Sam Larson-Disney, and I am here to talk to you about elevating your hack today. A bit of background on me. I've been in technology for probably upwards of 10 years now. I worked at American Express in R&D for a long time, building all sorts of ways to refer friends, like chatbots, steganography to change the Centurion on our credit cards into a scannable referral link, all sorts of AI related projects, and lots of animation work. I then went and worked for a design agency for a long time. And then most recently, I've worked for a company called Amplitude, which is a analytics-based company based out of the US. And today, I'm not here to talk to you about my job at all, because I have a serious problem. I have an addiction to hackathons. So I've attended over 60 hackathons as an attendee, mentor, sponsor, judge, and organizer. I have won over $100,000 in hackathon prize money, and I wrote one book on the subject. And so what I want to do today is try and give you as much of an overview of all of the things I can think of that will help you make the most of the event that you've got here with PolyHacks. And because of that, and because I'm going to cover such a wide range of content, if you have questions, I would actually prefer you to interrupt me. Please jump in if you want any clarification or further detail. I'll happily talk away. So I thought I'd just start with an introduction to hackathons. Hackathons come from a mixture of the word hack and marathon. They originally started in about 1999. There was a company called OpenBSD that decided to co-locate all of their colleagues for one event to try and hack out a piece of code purely because of legal requirements. They wanted them all to be in the US when they worked. And the reason hackathons have this all-night normal attitude is because all of these people were arriving from all over the world and they all had jet lag. So as a result, they were like up in the middle of the night, and it wasn't because of the hacking, it was purely because of the time zone they come from. But that kind of snowballed into all-night events, which I find absolutely fascinating. I always like to think of them as a great way to meet new people, learn new skills, and if you're lucky, earn some money. But the more common definition is an event in which a large number of people meet to engage in competitive computer programming. But I really don't like this definition. If I could change this definition, I would change it to an event in which a large number of people meet to engage in collaborative and competitive product creation. And the reason I think like that is because it doesn't really matter what your role is. Whether you're back-end, front-end, UX, graphic design, you all have something to contribute, because at the end of the day, the idea is the hack. You're trying to convey your idea to the judges, and the code is a part of that, but it is not really what the judges are going to look at in its entirety, right? It's that plus the presentation, plus submission, all the rest of it. And having that one cohesive product can be enhanced by having lots and lots of different roles. And there's no better example of this than my sister, who is in content marketing. She's never written a line of code in her life. We did a hackathon together. I gave her the proper hackathon experience with pizza. And we actually ended up taking first. And I think the reason we took first at this hackathon was because she did such a great job on graphic design and making our presentation look so polished. And I never could have done that on my own. So I really do believe that there is a place for everyone in these events. And actually, the more diverse your team is, the better it can be. So I thought we could start by looking at planning and timing. I believe that the hackathon kicked off today, so you're quite early on in the process. So taking some steps now to think about how you're going to work can really help you make the most of this event. And this is my pie chart of hackathon timing. And this might look a little bit foreign to you, but so 10% of your time at an absolute minimum should be for idea generation, right? Time to develop and refine that winning idea. You might use this time to perform all sorts of activities that help you really find those ideas that are great. We're going to talk about a few more of those in a little bit of detail in a little bit later. 60% of the time to build. And I always think that should be the absolute maximum. If you're dedicating more than 60% of time to the code, then you're doing it wrong, because there's the other bits that are so important, like the presentation and conveying that idea well, that you're actually doing yourself a disservice to continue coding past that point. 20% to your presentation, right? Use this time to create that presentation that tells the story of your hackathon journey. We'll be talking about what makes a great presentation later. 5% to your submission, right? Time to dedicate and polish off any of additional documents that you might have to do. Make sure that you're registered on PolyHack and that it's all sorted out and that submission's done. And then 5% to team building, right? So time for ceremonies, icebreakers, and any other form of activity that will help you to work better as a team. And as a general rule, I think if you do all of these parts and you give them all their proper time, you're going to do well at this event. You cannot fail. If you are luckily enough to be co-located in the same city, but joining remotely, I highly encourage you to get in the same room. You'll make better relationships. You'll find that you work better if you know each other face to face. So I would really, really encourage you to meet up in person if it is possible. I know it won't be for all of you. It certainly isn't for me over here in the UK right now. And it's also really important that you try and stick to the plan that you create. So I've got a few tips here that I hope will help. One is to run a ways of working session. So as you join your team for the first time, it's always good to try and understand how you work best, right? So maybe for me, I need time to get heads down coding and I don't want to be interrupted during that time. Maybe someone works best if they're pair programming, whatever it is, try and understand the best ways that you can enable each other to work well, because you're only as strong as the weakest link in the chain. And so if you can get all on the same page and understand how to get the best work out of each other, you're going to do better. I also like to have a planning session, right? So for this, I would say once every product iteration, and we'll talk about product iterations in a little bit, but for each of those product iterations, think, what is it that we need to achieve as a team in order to get to that next step, and plan out all those pieces of work so that you can then split them up and divide and conquer, right? And if you have people who aren't so technical, there is no harm in them getting involved in this, understanding what work needs to be involved, and then maybe making sure that that journey is documented in the presentation, even from the very beginning. I also think it's super important to nick some stuff from Agile. I don't know if you know what Agile is. I hope that many of you are software engineers, so you might have an understanding of Agile, but one very important process in Agile is stand-ups. So stand-ups are when you all stand up and you just explain what you're working on now, how it's going, and what you're going to work on next. And if you're working in a hackathon over some length of time, it's important that you're checking in with each other. So I would recommend, I think you're a longer hack. So every day I would be checking in and saying, hey, this is how it's going. This is what I'm going to be working on next. And then it's also good to call out anything you might need help with from your fellow teammates, or anything that might be dependent on your fellow teammates, so that you can ensure that you're all on the same page and working towards that goal in an effective way. And the other one that is sometimes overlooked is this thing called a retrospective or retro. And a retro is all about understanding how things are going and how things are working as a team. And I would recommend you do this about halfway through the hack, so that if there are any problems, you can pivot towards a better solution. And so during a retro, there are 4 main questions you want to ask. What has propelled you forward? What's working really well? Right? So these are the stuff like, okay, we're communicating really well as a team, or we're way ahead and we weren't expecting to be so far ahead, which has given us more time to be flexible. What are you enjoying? Talk about what is making you happy in this moment, so that we can ensure that you keep doing it. And then there's the more negative things. So what is slowing us down? What has delayed progress towards getting to the end of the hackathon project? And what are any upcoming risks and concerns that we want to call out as a team, to make sure that we're able to overcome them, or to be actively thinking about them as we continue going through the hackathon. And one great way to do this is to grab a whiteboard, put a sail ship in the middle, like you can see there on the right. And then in each of these sections, place the post-it notes, and then you can capture that and maintain it. I think that works really well anyway. And also, I think it's super important that no matter where you are on the hack, it's important to speak up always. If you keep things to yourself and you're struggling, then you're not going to be able to get your team support or mental support or whatever it is if you keep it to yourself. You'll always be better if you over communicate and don't under communicate. Next, I wanted to talk about the idea. So what makes a great idea? And so there are a few rules that I have for myself when I'm thinking about hackathon ideas. The first one is the simplicity rule. So in my opinion, you have a good idea when you can explain it in simple terms. If the concept takes half an hour to explain, you will struggle to convince your team to participate. And when you come to present it to the judges, you may lose their attention before you get to the demo project. Be sure you can distill it into an elevator pitch. So an elevator pitch is a short description of your project that can be used to explain the concept to anyone in a short amount of time. And if you struggle to create this, this might suggest that the idea you're embarking on might be too complex for the hackathon. So here are a couple of examples of elevator pitches that I've used in the past, right? We're building a product that translates digital footprints into real world effects. It says exactly what it does in a very succinct way. And then you've got the second one, powered by AI, Interview Toast gives you everything you need to make interviews a positive experience. Don't burn your next interview. And that don't burn your next interview was kind of like the tagline for our hackathon project. And it's always good to kind of have a little bit of fun with it too. The second rule is the relational rule. Keep the problem statement and idea related to you if at all possible. Firstly, it helps your motivation throughout the event. You'll be more invested in the solution if you solve a problem you experience. Secondly, a personal connection makes conveying a story about the idea's origin to the judges easier. And I wanted to give an example of a hackathon project where I think we embodied this quite well. So this is a project that I worked on called Dominate.codes. And I'm just going to jump ahead in the submission video to the interesting bit. But basically the idea is to improve multi-choice questions. So multiple choice questions are annoying. They all look the same. And you've got A, B, C, D, and you've got to go through them when you're revising. And we thought that was a really boring concept, and we wanted to try and change that. So what we did was we made a mini game that you can log into with your mates. And then when you jump into it, you're presented with a map. And each of those purple dots represents a question. And clicking on one of those purple dots will open up a multiple choice or similar question that when you answer will paint an area of the map, right? So this is turning what is normally a boring multiple choice question into an interactive game. And this is something that I wish existed when I was younger and when I was studying. And so I thought it was a really, really interesting idea. So this is actually the first hackathon I ever won money at, and it really did propel me forward. But it had a lot of interesting complexity to it. We learned an absolute ton. And I just think there's something to be said about trying to keep that project related to you wherever possible. The third rule is the potential rule. So make sure, if at all possible, that you choose an idea that has the possibility of being something grander outside of the hackathon. You've only got a limited time to work in here, but outside of the hackathon, you might decide that actually this idea is really good and I want to pursue it further. And ideas that are found at hackathons can go on to be worth millions of dollars. But the potential can be about more than just money. Perhaps your idea has the chance to help people or communities. There's a great example of this in a company called GroupMe. So thanks to Facebook and WhatsApp, group chats are a normality today. But back in 2011, if you wanted to send multiple people the same message, you would have to copy and paste it. And a team of two, Jared and Steve, were attending TechCrunch Disrupt at the time, which was a big hackathon back in the day. It still is. It is still rather large now. And at the time, they wanted to change and solve this problem because they'd experienced it themselves, going back to that relational role. So they built a thing called GroupMe, which creates private SMS groups between multiple people, friends, colleagues, or family. And the team themselves started using it as soon as they built it because it solved a real need that they had. And what's interesting is they didn't win the hackathon. They left with an honorable mention and no money, but they believed in their idea so much that they left their employment to pursue it further. And very shortly after, they raised 185 grand in hackathon funding to pursue the project further. And in less than a year, they were acquired by Skype for $80 million. So there really is the potential that your hackathon idea that you generate could go on to do great things. So think about it for the future as well as outside of the scope of this hackathon. Another really important thing that I think is so important is this idea of faking it until you make it. You're working within a limited time frame. You're going to have to try and build it as good as you can, but sometimes that's going to involve you pretending that pieces of it are working. It is so important that you focus on that core of the application, that distinguishing thing that shows your idea well, and forget everything else. I've seen so many hackathon projects where they spend 50% of their hackathon building a login screen when every single submission is going to have a login. Instead, focus on that core first, and anything else, fake it if you have to. I want to give an example of this. So 5 years ago, I went to an event called IC which is a student-run hackathon here in the UK. And one of the sponsors was Microsoft. And Microsoft had recently released their image recognition software at this time. And so they had a hackathon challenge around using Microsoft's image recognition APIs. And my team decided to build a project called Spidentify. And what Spidentify does is it takes an image of a snake, spider, or rat and attempts to classify it. So it will first work out whether it's a snake, spider, or rat, and then it will work out the species of snake, spider, or rat. And then if that species is going to, so if you were bitten by this species in the rainforest, you could take a picture of it and it would tell you whether you're in danger or not. And if you were in danger, maybe it was poisonous or whatever, it would direct you to the nearest hospital. And also, I just want to point out that this app looks awful, right? It's yellow, it's gross, it doesn't look like a modern web application. But it doesn't matter because it conveys the idea well enough to the judges. That's all you need to get to. So you can see here, we gave it a picture of a spider, it was analyzed it, and it's worked out that it's a black widow. Now, what's interesting is it didn't matter what image you gave it. It would always classify it as a snake, spider, or rat. So during our live demo, we gave it a picture of Donald Trump. And when he came out to be a snake, the whole room burst out laughing. And humor can be a really important tool too. And it's okay to fake it. And in fact, sometimes demonstrating the bits that are real and the bits that are fake and how that happened and that connection can make for a really good story like we managed to get here. So let's talk about some ways in which you can generate ideas. I want to steal two methods from something called the design sprint process. And if you're doing a lot of hackathons, I encourage you to look at the design sprint process, as it's all about generating lots of ideas very fast and getting them to MVP by the end of the week. And the first one I want to talk about is lightning demos. So lightning demos are all about finding comparable problems and their solutions. So the perfect hackathon solution may already be out there, just waiting to be recontextualized or repurposed. For example, if we take the hackathon challenge statement, one of the hackathon challenge statements from PolyHack, you can see, create an innovative solution that decreases the mental health impact of social media. What you should be doing is asking yourself the question, what other industries have managed to improve mental health already? So gather your team together and ask ask the following question: are there other industries with similar problems? And if so, which ones and what was the problem? And then the second point is you pull out your laptops and you have your team how industries have solved these problems, right? Do the research. And then you ask yourself, can the same method be applied to the problem statement at this hackathon? And if yes, then congratulations, you've just discovered a potential hackathon idea. By far, my favorite idea generation technique is one called Crazy Eights. Crazy Eights is an idea generation method that we take from design sprints directly. It is a quick sketching process that challenges you to create 8 distinct ideas in 8 minutes. And the idea is to generate a wide variety of solutions instead of focusing on any single idea. This process might feel like a foreign concept to those who haven't tried it before, particularly those that don't like drawing. Remind those of your team members that are participating that the drawings are intended to be rough and not by any means need to be perfect or beautiful. The only thing that you have to do is communicate an idea. And the ideas don't need to be excellent. The more out there and crazy and impractical, the better. The weird and wacky ideas are usually the ones that lead to the most creative solutions. So if they're crazy, you can scale them down and go, okay, that's mad. But if we make that smaller, what would it look like? And then that's why it's called Crazy Eights, because they're meant to be crazy. One of the craziest ideas I've come up with using this process was around gestures. So I was watching a TED talk and I saw that a lot of speakers, they use hand gestures to express while talking. And I was thinking to myself, that's such a waste of energy. What if we could do something? What if we could harness that gesture? What if we could use that energy to do something interesting? And so during lockdown, actually, I built a little tool that allows you to gesture to move slides backwards and forwards. So I've started a presentation on the right, and you can see as I gesture left and right, the slides go forwards and backwards. I'm using a little tool called PolyHack here to do this, which you can see is grabbing my webcam and working out where my skeleton is based on that information. So hopefully you get the idea. But this is super wacky and probably very impractical, because if you made the wrong gesture, the slide would go forward and backward, and that's probably not what you want. But it was a lot of fun, and it was a crazy idea that came out of a Crazy Eight session. So I thought I would just share it here. And while whittling down ideas, right, coming up with lots of them among your team, I encourage you to use yes and thinking. So yes and thinking is a method stolen from improvisational comedy that fosters a performer to listen to what another performer has said and expand upon it. Saying yes encourages people to internalize ideas and be more receptive to those proposed by others. Rather than quickly shutting an idea down, it would be best to initially accept it, enabling the discussion to expand on the idea without hindrance. Saying and helps people steer clear from directly changing the suggested idea and instead building on what has already been proposed. Now, you might have heard the term minimal viable product, and it's thrown around a lot as the smallest iteration of your product that you can build to demonstrate your idea. I prefer minimal viable prototype. MVPR is a low fidelity version of your product that you could ask people to try. It is just enough functionality to enable users to perform your hack's function so that you can learn from observing them attempt to complete that task. When we say low fidelity, we made a prototype that does not contain the visual qualities you might see in a final product. You might forget doing branding, color, content, and even layout. The focus here is entirely on functionality. So you might be asking yourself, how do I work out whether what we want to build is MVPR or not? And so I would encourage you to take your team's idea and define a single user journey that helps demonstrate that idea. And then just ask yourself, is this the smallest journey needed to demonstrate the idea? And if the answer is yes, then you can take that journey and work out the individual features that should live in that user journey. And then just ask yourself, are there any features on this list that we really don't need? And then you can throw some away if you need to. And then all you've got to do is ask yourself, can I manage this in the time frame? And if the answer is no, can you fake some of that functionality in this time frame? And if so, then great, you've got your MVPR. Otherwise, it suggests again that the idea might be too complicated to execute in the time frame. Hackathons will test you both physically and mentally, and I want to make that burden a little easier by providing you with some preparation ideas and remediation techniques. So a straightforward way to keep motivation up is to celebrate the little things. If you've made a tricky design decision as a team, if you've worked out one of the puzzle pieces that will combine to make this awesome product, or if your team wasn't working well, but suddenly it is, these all sound like high five worthy moments. And one of the best mini celebrations I've experienced was at around 10:45 p.m. after 3 hours of debugging some code that just would not work. And we finally got it working, and we found the piece of code that wasn't working right. And we realized that the pub was still open. So we actually left the hackathon venue and got a round of celebratory drinks in just before the last call bell rang. And this was a great team bonding exercise. So I would really encourage, in whatever way your team wants to do it, celebrate those little wins. It's always good to try and solve problems yourself before looking further afield, but it's really important that you time box your problem solving. You're always working against the clock in a hackathon environment. So time box your time for finding a solution. For example, say, okay, I'm going to spend 30 minutes trying to solve this problem. And if you still haven't found the answer, then reach out to mentors, reach out to experts, do what you can to try and get other people's help in on the problem so that you're not there left on your own. And if you can't in that moment, I would encourage you to drop the problem you're trying to solve and focus on another one until you can get the help you need, if possible. Sometimes, no matter how well you plan, the project you've decided to undertake is too technically complex and you won't know it until it's a little bit too late, right? Maybe you're 12 hours in and suddenly you go, gosh, this is far bigger than we thought. There's a lot more code we have to write than we were expecting. And when these complexities arise, your team might realize that the challenge you have undertaken is not feasible in the time frame. And in this situation, you have three possible routes. You could ask yourself, can the functionality be simplified? And if it can, do it, because you're going to save yourself the hassle. And at the end of the day, the code is only a small piece of this larger hackathon project. Backtrack. Would building this functionality be more straightforward to create in another coding language or format? Is there some way we can rework what we were trying to do into a different format that will make this easier? And finally, as we've already said before, fake it. Could you fake this functionality to better demonstrate the idea, but use that as a last resort only? Obviously, it is better to code it for real if at all possible. And there's also problems with language nuances. So hackathons are safe spaces to learn something new, and you're often encouraged to learn new programming languages. Learning isn't instant, no matter how much of a sponge you are. If you are working with a language for the first time and you are struggling to find the correct syntax, consider there's a few things you can do to try and solve this for yourself. So the first is the most obvious: perform a Google search. Sometimes the answer is only a Google search away. If you already know the syntactical vocabulary from another programming language, try combining it with the language that you're trying to implement. For example, for loop JavaScript. A loop is something that exists in most programming languages, so you can combine the search with the language that you understand in order to help you find that solution. GitHub is also a great resource, right? So GitHub is the most prominent source code host on the internet with hundreds of millions of code repositories publicly accessible. You can try and find instances of projects that are using code in similar ways to you and borrow their implementations. And then, of course, ask a mentor if at all possible. Call upon one of the individuals specifically there to help. When engaging with a mentor, you'll get to your answer quicker by first explaining what the problem is and how you've already tried to fix it, right? So that they don't recommend the things that you've already tried. This stops them from repeating ideas. You could also announce it to the room. I know you've got a Discord channel set up, so it's sometimes easy to forget that there are many technical people around you. If a mentor can't help you, it might be the case that another participant at the event can. There is absolutely no harm in throwing the question out to the room. That one embarrassing moment might save you hours of searching. So I really do encourage you to do that. And sometimes the code just doesn't behave, right? And it's just because of a lack of understanding. You might have the syntax perfect and still have errors. So here are some ways to find the answers. Again, paste the error into Google. You never know what you might find. Stack Overflow is a great resource, the world's biggest question and answer forum for programmers. But before asking your question, check that there isn't a similar question published on the platform that might have the answers you need. And of course, in exactly the same way as the previous section, ask a mentor. One of the most frustrating things is when you get near the end of the project and you can't tie everything together. Maybe you have a front end and back end that is working independently, and there is often a frantic rush to join them together right at the end. And you might find that sometimes the jigsaw pieces just don't fit. This can be because the plan for how the parts will work together was miscommunicated early on, or perhaps one part is not quite finished. In either case, communication upfront is the best possible path to remediation. If you get close to time and don't think you'll be able to glue the two pieces together, don't panic. There is no harm in showing these pieces in your demo separately and explaining how they will work together in the future. And one last thing, all of these challenges, capture them. Hindsight is a beautiful thing. You'll probably look back on these difficulties and think you could have handled them better. Instead of keeping this to yourself, talk about it in your submission and presentation. This shows a great deal of transparency and shows how human you are to the judges, which is never a bad thing. And also, sleep is so underrated. Please, please, please sleep, especially as you get close to the deadline and you're frantic. You'll probably find that the work you do will be better if you've had enough sleep. So I would really encourage you to get some sleep as well. And as this hack is a little bit longer, the other thing I'd suggest is not compromising on downtime. Your initial thought might be to work on the hackathon all weekend. This can negatively impact your performance across all your work as you are constantly tired. It would be best if you were dedicated some time to recharge your batteries. It's also essential to ensure that your partners and friends don't feel neglected. So please, please, please take some downtime too. I also just wanted to touch on some UX wins. So if you get to that MVPR and you're asking yourself, what can you do next? Think about the user experience. Build that project with your users in mind, and also remember that you are not your users. Sometimes it's very easy to make design decisions as a team without considering the person that is not present, but the person that matters most. One thing that my teams try to do when we do hackathon projects is do user interviews. And this is a great way to make your hackathon project stand out. So build your project, and when it's in a usable state, get on a Zoom call, or if possible in a room with some potential users that you can then get actionable feedback from. It's also a great thing to talk about this in the presentation, because not every team will do this and it can really make you stand out. Also think about what colors you're using. I mean, I showed you that project before where I had yellow backgrounds. Yellow is a warning color. Yellow and red, we all associate with certain statuses. So it's better to try and use more neutral colors where appropriate, and think about how the colors in your applications work together. And there are lots of different resources out there on the internet. If you Google color theory, that will help you out with this. You can see some examples here, like red on green doesn't work very well. The contrast is too low on that one on the top right. And you can see that the bottom right one is easy to read, and just little decisions like that will make your project look more professional when you come to present it in the demo. Oh, the other thing I wanted to talk about, and I find this super interesting, is that if you are working in a space with competitors and you're designing a logo that you're going to show on your app, get a color line up and then add all of the logos of your competitors on that line, and then look for any gaps. So you can see here what I've done is had a look at some tutoring apps that are out there and available. And now I've suggested that maybe the area of green and purple would be a good idea to use for a logo because no one else is using colors in that space. Now let's talk about the submission a little bit, right? So that's the document at the end of the hackathon that you'll submit that explains how you did it, what you did, and about the team as well. The first and most important thing to do in this document is to frame the problem. I always find that the best way to start this section is by having a thought-provoking question. For example, have you ever thought how hard it would be to use the internet if you were blind? Or what impact does your internet usage have on the planet? Once you've sowed the seed of the problem, use data to explain the scale of the issue. Using real data points dramatically enhances your credibility and helps convey that you know what you're talking about. And make sure to provide links to wherever that data comes from. Then, obviously, it's super important to explain your idea. What is your idea? How does it fix the problem? Here, you can really start to lay out what it is that your app actually does. Regardless of how you word this, ensure that you articulate precisely how your idea solves the problem that you have identified. I also think it's super important to call out who is in the team and what work they did, right? You want to show that you worked collaboratively well and that you built something together as a team, and everybody will have had a part to play in that. So make sure that you're calling that out wherever possible. Technical architecture is super interesting. You'll probably all use different technologies during this project, and they'll all interact with each other differently as well. Make sure that you give the judges a high-level overview of these technologies and how they communicate with each other, so that even if they don't delve into the code in as much detail as you might like, they still understand the technologies that you're using. And then there are a few extra things that you can do on this submission document that will make your project stand out and that probably most teams will not think about. The first is to talk about your planning and timing. How did you structure the time that you had available, right? This shows a great level of organization, right? So maybe you spent the first couple of days planning and then you spent most of your time building, but then you also as a team dedicated time to testing and your presentation. And that can be a really interesting story to tell. So I would really encourage you to talk about planning and timing wherever possible. And this one's the big one. Talk about monetization, right? Talk about how you would make this into a real business. If you were to continue working on this project, it's essential to think about costs. Nothing in this world is free. So start by focusing on how much it would cost to run your project. Look at the domain and server hosting costs and try to estimate the cost per month based on different levels of demand. If you're not happy with the numbers, still be honest about them, and then expand on how you would seek to reduce those costs in the future. Next, move on to how much you would charge your users. This could be a one-off fee or a subscription. It's also a good idea to talk about how you might hook users in with a free trial or something like that. And once you've worked out the cost of running the project and the amount you'll charge your users, you can start to estimate the profit that you'll make as well. This will always be an estimate, so you should call this out as such. And then another great section to include is next steps, right? Explain where you would take this project if you had more time. How would you take this project from MVPR or MVP to a deployed product? One great way to structure this is to think about timeframes, right? What would you do if you had another hackathon's worth of time, or a month's worth of time, or a year's worth of time? What do those next steps look like? And if you're stuck with ideas, you might tie this section back to your challenges and talk about the potential solutions that you might want to continue to investigate. And then when you get to present it, it gets back to the presentation itself, whether that's the demo video or in person. Remember that it's all about conveying your idea, right? The idea is the hack. That's the primary purpose. Don't get stuck in technical details. Keep it high level, keep it understandable by everyone, regardless of their level of experience. And one thing that you might not realize, but all of your content for your presentation deck is already in your submission document if you've done that well, right? You can pull out the core things from that submission document and throw those into the presentation, and your work is pretty much done. The only thing I would say is avoid text-heavy slides. Don't copy and paste the whole paragraph from your submission document and put it onto your slides. Instead, keep it big, keep it bold, and keep it simple. Also, it's really important that you allow every member of your team a chance, an opportunity to speak. You've all worked on this together and you all deserve the credit. So I would encourage you, even if you have one person that is a far better speaker than others, they won't get better unless they have the opportunity to practice that skill. So give everyone an opportunity to have a go. And then finally, let's talk about next steps, right? So the hackathon's over, you found out whether you've won or not, and now what should you do next? And the first and most important thing is that you thank everybody. Thank the organizers, because I can tell you there is a lot of effort that has gone into this hackathon. Thank your teammates, right? What did they do well? Compliment them. What worked as a team? What would you want more of in the future? Keep in contact with each other. I've made friends at hackathons who are now lifelong friends, and I would encourage you to keep those connections. And who knows, maybe you'll go into the next hackathon together. Also, as students, you have an amazing opportunity to get a project in your portfolio in a really short amount of time. So as soon as you have that project, document it, write a blog post about how you did it, put that out there, put it on your LinkedIn, and then keep a collection of these projects, because it's so difficult as a student to get software engineering jobs or similar without a portfolio. And it's great to be able to demonstrate your skill. So keep them, share them, have a personal website where you throw these up if you need another hackathon project. Yeah, it's a really, really good idea to keep these and collect them. And the other thing I just wanted to say is winning isn't the only way to win, right? You can earn learn a ton of stuff. You can also have something quite interesting happen to you. So for me, right, this is me at a hackathon that I worked at last February, called Hack the Press here in the UK. Now you can see I'm the only person there, and that's because it's about 6 in the morning, and I decided to show up early and work hard, really hard. I was really invested in the project that I was building. And interestingly enough, Joe, the organizer, clocked on to the fact that I was quite a hard worker and that my project was interesting. And Joe's now my boss, right? So Joe actually hired me off the back of this event, right? You never know who's watching. So I would really encourage you to do your best, because you never know what opportunity might arise as a result of this hackathon project. You know, I've been doing hackathons for 10 years. I've got to visit all sorts of places all around the world. I've met some fascinating people, and I've had loads of experiences come my way as a result. And one final thought: be kind. Hackathons, we're all responsible for how a hackathon runs, right? You as attendees are going to make up a lot of the experience that other attendees are going to come across. So make sure that you are being kind to each other and helping them out wherever possible. And all that's left for me to say is thank you, because it's been great to be here and I've really enjoyed talking to you all. And I've spoken for 45 minutes, and what I want to do is really open it up to any questions on anything hackathon related. I will happily answer anything or help go into more detail on anything. So please ask away if you have questions. Any questions? Anyone brave enough to ask me a question? Oh, they're shy.
Hello.
Hi.
So our team is currently working on ideation. So I asked, do you think it's better to cooperate like existing solutions on the prompt to build something like contextualized or actually innovate it? Because I think for the topic we mostly have to build in like some functions such as like something like Chrome extension, that kind of stuff. But if it's a new platform, I don't think it's really that applicable to the questions.
Sorry, just can you just repeat the actual question? Would you mind? Can you repeat the question?
So I just want to ask, do you think it is better to have a very new, innovative, like platform, or actually built on existing solutions but contextualize it to the question?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So the answer is it depends. There's no easy answer to that one. If there is something comparable in an adjacent space, then I think it's okay to build out a similar solution. What I don't think is okay is if there is a solution that already solves the problem in the same way in the space you're looking at, then that's not okay because it's a duplicate, right? You don't want to be creating a solution that already exists. So if it's the case that your solution exists, then instead focus on building something fresh, 100%. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions? Also, feel free to put them in the chat if you don't want to speak. That's also fine. Anyone else? Which one of the prompts do I find the most interesting? So I got sent, just out of interest, is the challenge list I got sent the final challenge list, or did it get updated after I saw it?
I think you got sent what ended up being the final one. So we have 3 questions, right? A question for AI, which was related to social media and mental health. A question for fintech, which was about reducing the struggles of international transfers, and a question for smart city, which is related to a development project near PolyHack called Green Tech.
Okay, so the one that I find the most interesting is the social media one. And the reason for that is actually because it's the one that's the widest, right? The other two, one is around transferring money, which means that the likelihood of seeing similar projects to your solution being pitched is going to be more likely. And then the second one around smart cities, it says that you have to use certain technologies. The only one that is very wide and more free is that first one. So if it was me, I'd probably be going down the social media mental health route for that one. Yeah. But that's, again, it's all about playing the odds, right? Like, I don't know how popular these challenges are. And if there's some way that, as attendees, I don't know, those of you who are physically located can talk to each other. Maybe it's best to go for those challenges that have fewer projects going for them. It improves your odds regardless of the quality of the project, right? It also helps the organizers because it distributes the projects among the challenges. So it's a win-win for everyone involved. So that's, I've got another question that was sent to me directly. Hi, I would like to ask whether hackathon solutions are limited to software or if hardware components can be developed. I don't know if I can answer that or whether PolyHack can answer that for me.
So we do take both hardware and software, but in both cases, you have to show that it is an actually viable solution. So if you're going with hardware, if you can provide us with a prototype or something like this during your submission, then you're good to go. Especially for Green Tech, this one is related to IoT. So more likely than not, you will have to do some kind of real life building.
Another question: do you suggest we do user validation before or after creating a prototype for a demo if we want our project to be user-centric? So if you have the time, the right way to do this in my head is actually to create a design prototype first, right? Use Figma or Sketch or an equivalent tool and build out what it will look like. right? Put that in front of customers as soon as possible, maybe even day 1 or 2 of you actually doing it. Get feedback on that design before you actually build it out as a solution. That's probably the best way to do it. If you have a backend service that is likely to be used regardless, you can get your backend engineers working on that while you create the design. So there's still a way to have them work in parallel. But I do think that if you do it at the front like that, that's great, but still do it at the end or in the middle as well. You want to be getting as much feedback as possible from your users at every stage of that journey, right? Because you'll shape your project into the best possible solution for them. What are some of the ideas you have for the AI solution? I'm not giving away ideas. That's cheating. So that's not happening. But I like the enthusiasm. You're going to have to come up with ideas on your own. But if you have more questions and you haven't sent them to me, that I'm also happy to answer any questions in regard to hackathons online, on LinkedIn or Twitter. Feel free to reach out to me. Happy to help in any way that I can. Yeah. Any final questions? Okay, should we end it there? Oh, wait, we got one. What would you do if you feel your technical knowledge is lacking compared to your teammates? I would firstly use this as a learning opportunity, right? Make it clear that you're still making an effort as well. If possible, I don't know if you're co-located or not. If you're co-located, sit next to someone who is more skilled, pair program with them, and slowly as your understanding improves, try and find ways that you can pull work off their plate and onto yours. Another suggestion is that if you're remote, there's some great tools on Visual Studio Code or the equivalent that allow you to screen share or be in the same code base at the same time so that you can see how it's working. I would just encourage you to be an observer as much as possible and the doer as much as possible too. Just really try and get involved. And even if you are technically lacking, there's a whole load of stuff you can do while they are coding, right? You can make the most polished presentation deck known to man. You can start the submission document on day 1 and the presentation on day 1, and I would encourage you to do so because it's going to be easier as you go through the hackathon to drop notes in as you go. And maybe you're effectively the team planner and in charge of making sure that those ceremonies that I talked about, like stand-up, etc., are happening. Like maybe you'll just be the facilitator for the team. That's a really important thing to do. So there's plenty of different ways that you can get involved, even if you don't write a single line of code, right? I talked about my sister, who's a marketer, who came and got involved with me, and she had a great time. She really did. Next question, is it ethical if we use parts components from our previous projects for other hackathons, if they have a similar functionality? So it's going to depend on the hack. Most of them allow you to use open source code from other projects, but if you're literally porting your whole project across, then I think that's no good, right? I also think it's important that if you do something like that and you're building on something that you've already built, you explicitly call out in your submission what's new and what already existed before, because judges are going to have a hard time judging your project against others if they don't understand that distinction. One last question. Can you rank or suggest the best business models, freemium, B2B, B2C, subscription-based? That is totally going to depend on the project that you're building and who your target market audience is, right? So if you're pitching something to business, then B2B is the way to go. For users, if you're building a platform, I think the best thing to do is to look at what people are used to, right? So if you're building a video streaming service, what's Netflix do, right? Oh, their subscription model. Maybe that's a sensible way to go, right? It's always best to borrow from other services that are similar to yours or offering similar things. Can I suggest any good sources or websites to learn business models? Gosh, I mean, this isn't my area. But I would, as I said before, just encourage you to think, okay, this is the service we're building, and a comparable service is this. What do they do, right? Look for comparable services and what they offer. That would be my suggestion. Okay, should we end it there? I'm gonna give you like 10 seconds for one last question if there are any. Otherwise, I'm gonna end it. Oh, can we get a link of your projects for inspiration? Absolutely. I can do that. So I will put some links in the chat. There's one with some hackathon projects, and some slightly larger projects can be seen here. Based on your previous experience in hackathons, what is the most programming language used by competitors out there? I've seen a lot more JavaScript than anything else. That being said, there are hackathons that are more data-centric, where Python's a lot more popular. The cool thing about JavaScript is you can write backend and front end. And if you're new to coding and trying to work out what is a good language to start, JavaScript can be really good. There's just because it gives you the ability to help on both sides of the stack. So I would really encourage JavaScript if you're brand new. That being said, there are hackathons out there for all different programming language, but JavaScript is probably the one that is the most common. Would we be, yeah, anyone who wants to can reach out to me later and answer that question. Yeah, that's absolutely fine. I don't mind helping out where possible. Just please remember, I'm in the UK. So it might be the middle of the night for me. So if you don't get a reply, I'm not ignoring you. I'm just asleep. So how can you reach me? My LinkedIn and Twitter is on my website, which I've just linked there. So feel free to reach out or connect with me on LinkedIn. That's absolutely fine.
I think you might have sent your website link to someone specifically and not.
Oh, I think you're right. You're absolutely right. Sorry. Everyone in the meeting. There we go. So those are my hackathon projects. These are my slightly larger projects, and my LinkedIn and Twitter can be found here if you have questions later. That's absolutely fine.
I think we should also put that in our Discord channel later on. We can include Sam's website and LinkedIn. We will put it in our Discord. You can contact him anytime. Yeah, appreciate that, Sam.
Available to help. No, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. And I wish you all the best as well. I didn't say that. Good luck. I'm sure that there's going to be some great projects, and I'd love to see them when they're done.
We're excited too.
I think it's great. I think it's great that you've got this hackathon that's a bit longer, right? It gives you a bit more flexibility on how you use your time than these shorter events. So yeah, really, really excited.
What's a common range of hackathon you see throughout your journey? So
it's internal ones. A lot of companies do them inside their companies, and it's normally like, we can only dedicate one day because we've got real commitments, and those can be tricky because you're working to kind of like 5 hours of actual code time, and then you've got to present. So that can be interesting. I think the most common format is the weekend, right? Saturday and overnight to Sunday. Those ones, I think, I used to be able to stay up all night. I cannot do that anymore. But I think that is the. Yeah, I mean, to be fair, you're all students. You should be absolutely fine, right? But I think that's the best length of time for at a minimum, right, for hackathons, because you've got time to do the presentation as well as the project. And then I've done ones that are 2 months long. I've just finished one for Square. They had one on Dev Post that was crazy long. There were 1,300 people signed up. Something like 85 projects submitted. So yeah, very. I'm not feeling too good about that one. I don't know how it's going to turn out, but yeah, super fun to try out new technologies. And hackathons are run for all sorts of reasons. Big companies will run them to try and get hiring, but actually, because of tech layoffs at the beginning of this year, there's less of those going on. But there's still a lot of hackathons running where people are like, use this technology to build a solution. And that's them encouraging you to try out different technologies so that later down the line, when you're presented with a similar problem, you go, okay, I'm going to use their technology, right? And that's the way that they'll make money out of hackathons. So that's why they're run. But I mean, student run ones are very different, right? I think, I think there's nothing better than a student run one where you can just learn a ton in a super short amount of time. For me, one of my earliest hackathon memories is learning React, which is a JavaScript front-end framework, at a hackathon. And it was 2 in the morning and I was struggling. and it was the first time I'd ever used front-end code before. And I got help from one of the sponsors, and I like, even at 2 a.m, like it's just madness that you can get help in the middle of the night. And as a result, I'm now like, I love the front end so much that I actually had a graduate scheme set up, and I decided that I wanted to do front end in that role. I'm still in front end today. Like I literally, that moment with that mentor in the middle of the night changed my life. And that's kind of why I do stuff like this, because I think it's important to pay it forward.
All right.
Really appreciate the help in this amazing workshop today.
You're so welcome.
Ronnie Wong is asking, how can we find long-term mentors? So I'm assuming that's outside of the hackathon.
So the way I've had success with this is finding people that inspire me on LinkedIn and Twitter, and actually just messaging them directly. What's the worst that's going to happen? They're going to say no, right? They're too busy, but they might just say yes. You never know. I think for me, just having the confidence to put yourself out there is the hardest bit. But I don't know what else to suggest for that one. Yeah, just ask. You've got nothing to lose. May I ask, do you pay back mentors with the projects are successful in getting profit? So that's an interesting point. So one thing that I find is uncommon is that projects go on from hackathons to do bigger things, right? I would say probably like 1 in 200 becomes a successful product off the back of a hackathon. So it's not common that mentors get paid back. That being said, I must admit that being a mentor is very rewarding, even without monetary payment, right? Watching someone succeed and learn something new and seeing them thrive can be enough reward in itself. At least that's what I found for myself. All right, shall we end it there?
Yeah, I think we're good to go.
Right.
Thank you everyone for coming. Thank you, Sam, for hosting. If you don't mind staying a minute afterwards.
Sure, no worries.
We'll be posting the recording on YouTube within a few days. So if you guys want to check it out, you can then. We also have another workshop tomorrow morning, specifically for Smart City. So we strongly encourage you to RSVP. If you're coming face to face in PolyHack, you'll need a QR code that we'll send you. Or otherwise, we will still have the online session. We're also having an open session with the organizers tonight. If you guys have any questions, if you want to bother us about the qualifiers, the person who designed most of the qualifiers questions will be there tonight. So I look forward to meeting some of you there, and best of luck in your hackathon.